Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another just excellent show for you today. I am joined again by the one and only Niall Stanage, back from across the pond. No, you didn't actually go.
I didn't. We can say that. Make my lifestyle sound much more exotic than it actually is.
How have you been this week?
I have been very well, Robbie, despite the fact that it is rather gloomy weather today in Washington, D.C.
Gloomy, gloomy, gloomy.
But we're bringing some light to proceedings. And you're going to bring more light to proceedings right now. That was a perfect segue there. Mm-hmm. What's on your radar, Robbie?
Let there be light, I suppose. Two reporters have released a new book, Fight, Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House, that does shine new light on the extent of President Joe Biden's cognitive decline over the course of his re-election campaign and, of course, before. Amy Parnes, our colleague here at The Hill, and Jonathan Allen of NBC News gained access to Biden's inner circle, discovering that top officials had grave concerns about Biden's fitness for the presidency. These concerns long predated the public's own awareness of the extent of the decline. In fact, Vice President Kamala Harris had discussed plans, get this, for what to do in the event of Biden's sudden death, i.e., which judges she would want to swear her in as president. These plans were formulated by Jamal Simmons, a communications director who departed Harris's team in January 2023. In other words, Harris was thinking through worst-case scenarios as far back as that. By the time of Biden's disastrous July debate with President Donald Trump, the president's cognitive decline was so bad that aides had to help him navigate a home where a fundraiser was being held by placing fluorescent tape on the floor to guide him from spot to spot. Parnes and Allen confirmed the shocking detail in an interview with me on Rising. Let's watch.
You went to a small fundraiser, fluorescent tape on the floor to guide him where he needs to go. On foreign trips, there's a makeup artist who comes in first thing in the morning to kind of liven him up and do his makeup ahead of these meetings. He wasn't doing television, he was going into meetings. The first thing was to bring in this makeup artist to help him. And all of this we reveal in the book for the first
Fluorescent tape?
Yes. And,
to show him where to go at a fundraiser at Governor Phil Murphy's house. So a small place, and it's like fluorescent tape on the floor pointing him where to go in a house. And when he goes to speak to the donors outside, he's got a teleprompter, he's and a podium, in this small patio area. That night they go in for this private dinner, and he's talking about Ukraine, and he's kind of making sense, and then he starts trailing off. And this happens repeatedly, where he's kind of doing well and then trailing off. And finally, Biden sort of realizes what's going on himself.
You might have thought this fundraiser was being held in like the labyrinth of King Minos with a little monster in the middle of it. Well, it was not. It was held at the residence of New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. Now, Murphy, to be clear, has a very big house, and repairs and renovations to that mansion actually cost the New Jersey taxpayers $862,000. Thank you very much for that, I suppose. Nevertheless, the fact that Biden needed flashy visual cues just to survive a friendly fundraising event obviously raised serious and immediate questions about his ability to fulfill the more demanding aspects of his job as president. And yet, top Biden surrogates maintained that he was totally capable of remaining president, even after he had exited his re-election campaign. Ron Klain, Biden's former chief of staff, asserted in August 2024 that Biden was, quote, clearly up to the job. He's doing it every day, said Klain. He's doing it successfully. Now, Klain doesn't even have the excuse that he was obligated to say something positive about Biden because he was working for him. At that point, he was out of the job. I guess personal loyalty matters more than the truth. That's fine, but then why do we still take these people seriously? That was then, though. Now, Klain is admitting the truth. He told reporter Chris Whipple, who has also released a tell-all book on the real story of the Biden campaign, he says that Klain told him the following. Klain, Whipple writes, quote, wondered half seriously if Biden thought he was president of NATO instead of the U.S. He just became very enraptured with being the head of NATO, he said. That wouldn't help him on Capitol Hill because, as Klain noted, domestic political leaders don't really care what Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz think. Yeah. President of NATO. That's what every far-right conservative commentator accuses Biden of having prioritized the interests of NATO over the U.S. Now, Klain scheduled a practice debate as well for Biden. It was supposed to go for 90 minutes, but Biden could only make it through 45 minutes, at which point, quote, again, this is according to Whipple's book, The president's voice was shot, and so was his grasp of the subject. All he really could do was talk about his infrastructure plan and how he was rebuilding America and 16 million jobs. He had nothing to say about his agenda for a second term." End quote. Given all that, I mean, it's no wonder Biden lost. It's sort of remarkable that he didn't actually resign the presidency, instead did serve out his time despite these obvious impairments. Here's my question. It's a question I've asked many times. Does anyone actually have trust now in high-level political operatives like Ron Klain, or important politicians like Kamala Harris, who surely knew, or Democratic spokespeople like Karine Jean-Pierre, who absolutely knew? Haven't they discredited themselves forever? They were perfectly happy to pretend the president was capable of fulfilling his duties when we know they knew he absolutely was not. And it's sort of beyond question at this point. So this is something we've discussed a lot on this show, Niall, but we'll continue discussing it a lot because now people are coming out with books on the subject, really digging into the details. And Amy Parnes did a great job, who we did that interview with earlier this week. Really fantastic book that everybody should check out. This Whipple book sounds interesting too. Everybody admitting, yeah, it was so bad, and it was so bad for so long. And maybe it's an indictment of the media at the time for failing to notice how apparent it was. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I have a mixed take. Look, I don't think that anyone now denies that there was a serious cognitive decline. I do think that decline accelerated over the course of Biden's term. So even at the start of his presidency, he was, I think, more vigorous and more tuned in than he was by the end. I do think it is, I mean, like you, I'm obviously looking forward to digging in properly to Amy and John's book. In relation to some of the apparent duplicity that we would talk about there, that seems pretty clear that people did know and didn't say, and are now coming out and saying it. Now, who exactly knew what they should have said, all of those things get, I think, a little complicated because the decision stemmed from Biden. If Biden had decided to be a transitional president and hand over the reins after one term, that would be a completely different situation. I don't, whether it's Ron Klain or anyone else, I'm not sure. What are you supposed to say if the President of the United States says, yes, I'm going forward, I'm well able to do this? Whether you're working for him or not, do you say publicly, no, he can't? There are people, not to be all like, what about Trump? But I mean, do people who are close to Donald Trump really think he's a completely stable personality who thinks through all the decisions that he makes while president? I don't think they do think that. But they're not coming out and saying, well, this guy's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I hear that, and you're right that the original sin was Biden's decision to run for re-election, and everything flows downstream from that. Everything that happened was kind of inevitable based on his decision to do that. I guess one does hope, and one can be an anti-Trump figure who takes the view that, yes, people in his inner circle should resign in protest, should speak up, should say to the media, this person is a maniac and shouldn't be in control. I think liberal media would celebrate them for doing that.
Sure.
But I guess I would have some hope that even independent, I mean, that's sort of an ideological judgment. I know maybe liberal people think it's beyond ideology and he's just such a reprehensible maniac. But I guess if the president had a stroke and was completely incapacitated, I hope they wouldn't try to cover it. I hope someone, and then if other people were going to try to cover it up, I would hope that someone would leak to the press that you have no idea how bad the president is actually physically incapacitated. Now, this has happened throughout our history. Obviously, FDR was in a wheelchair, and the media was complicit in covering that up. That doesn't speak to his actual mental faculties whatsoever. Woodrow Wilson was quite incapacitated after serious disease for the end of his presidency, and a lot of decisions were actually being made by his wife, Edith Wilson. So I think in this media climate, this scoop-chasing, hungry media climate, you wouldn't be able to get away with something like that. But they kind of did for a while. They didn't totally, but they kind of did.
And the people who did report on it often got very serious, vigorous pushback from the White House.
Interesting stuff. Well, we'll have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising today. Please stay with us. We're just getting started.